What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Devy YouTube channel. We're back with another edition of our top 25 college football teams. We got the Georgia Bulldogs next. They came in at number 3. Not our rankings out there, Georgia fans. So maybe Kirby can put this up on the bulletin board and say, hey, look, ESPN didn't believe in us. They said that we're not very good. Last year, they absolutely were. They won the national title, as we know. So we're going to be diving into what this year looks like. New quarterback, kind of some new turnover on offense. They kind of reloaded there on defense. They look to be even better than last year, which is scary. So we're going to be diving into their entire roster on both sides of the ball, their schedule, and all things Georgia Bulldogs here on this episode. So hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the other side of the intro. All right, let's talk Georgia Bulldogs. Last time I have to talk about Stetson Bennett. Right now, they went 15-0 last year. Offensively, they were 5th in the country, 41 points per game. They were 5th in the nation for opponents' points per game allowed on defense. They were absolutely phenomenal there. You know, we know what Stetson did. He had 4,000 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 7 receptions. You know, running, they had a really strong rushing attack behind just multiple running backs there. And, you know, when you're looking at it, they absolutely crushed TCU 65-7 in one of the lopsided national championship games in college playoff history. Then you have Peach Bowl against Ohio State. They were able to pull that one out, and they look great. And when you're looking at Georgia, obviously Smart has built a dynasty, and we know that. He's new Alabama out there. We've kind of talked about him taking over that reign from Nick Saban possibly. And this year, it's going to be interesting how he kind of builds this, because this is one of those weird transition years on offense, but they could be better. They did reload those positions. We're going to get into it. So let's talk about the offensive line. Christian, what do they got coming back?
So they have their whole interior coming back, which is a big thing. Having your whole interior of your offensive line coming back is really good. And then when you talk about the 2 new tackles, I think you're feeling pretty good about it. Amarius Mims is getting some legitimate NFL draft buzz in a similar way to Broderick Jones last year, in that we hadn't quite seen a whole lot from him. But man, is this kid toolsy. Like, in the snaps that he was out there, he looks like he could be one of the best tackles in the country, and we just need to see him on the field. Ernest Green, top recruit. I think that he'll be a nice little addition on that left side. So when you're talking bar for bar, I don't think they're going to lose anything from an offensive line that had a first-round pick last year. So I think they're in good shape, as they should be. It's Georgia. They plug and play. But this one especially, I think those 2 guys at tackle could maybe even raise the ceiling of this offensive line.
Okay, well, that's scary. We're already talking about raising the ceiling of an offensive line that won a national title. But yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And you're talking about the inside, the inside of that offensive line is going to be great. And, I like Tate Rutledge a lot. He's kind of one of those guys that you just like, he's just the dirty guy out there, does all the dirty work. And when you're talking about the offense, for the first time in, I don't know how long, probably since 2016, since, Kirby took over, they had a quarterback battle this offseason, but it's over. Carson Beck was named a starter, and it looks like they're going with Beck, and Beck's going to be good. I think Beck is one of those players that I think he fits this offense very well. And I think he gives them more of a quarterback than Bennett was. And I like Stetson Bennett. I know he won back-to-back national championships, but he could open up this offense a little bit from the, wide receiver position. And we know Todd Monken is gone now, offensive coordinator. He is now the offensive coordinator of Baltimore Ravens. So that's going to be a little bit of a different kind of viewpoint. But yeah, Beck's there. Then a running back, they have probably one of the deeper running backs in the rooms in the country. Kendall Milton is a guy that me and Christian really like. We've liked him for a long time. He just can't stay healthy, but I do think that he has value there. Dejon Edwards is really good. Branson Robinson has looked like he's 30 since he's been 15, and he is a beast out there on that field. You like that? Roderick Robinson as well. Andrew Paul is a guy too. Like, when you're looking at these guys, and in the wide receiver room, they did go out and get some talent. Obviously, they lost A.D. Mitchell, but they brought in Ra Thomas from a transfer. Dominic Lovett was one of the best wide receivers in the SEC last year, and he was better than, all-star, teammate Luther Burden. Everybody kind of All-American had penciled him in it, but Lovett was the guy. And then they have your guy, Ladd McConkey, and he is just that. He is a Georgia wide receiver that's just going to be a pain in the ass to watch if you want these other guys to pop off, because Ladd's just going to earn targets. He's going to do those things. He's going to do the dirty work. And then they have Brock Bowers, who is probably I don't know, the best. I mean, yes, he's the best tight end, but as far as prospect goes, since Kyle Pitts, these guys, Bowers is right there with them. And Oscar Delp is nothing to sneeze at either. Like, one of the deepest rooms there. This offense is just probably going to be humming.
Yeah, I think Kirby is. It's interesting. Kirby's like the Kyle Shanahan of college football, in that Stetson was not the better quarterback. I think Carson Beck has more talent, but Stetson saw the field better. He made the right decisions, and he ran the offense in the way that Kirby wanted. I think Beck is kind of taking those steps, and so you look at the dichotomy between Beck and Vandegrift. Vandegrift's a little more volatile. He's going to throw the ball all over because he's fun. I do like Vandegrift as a prospect, and I actually liked Gunnar Stockton a bit as well. But Beck is getting the nod this year. Kendall Milton, love him. Hope he stays healthy. Hope he has a big year. I do love Lad McConkey. I think that he's a very good separator. He's really good after the catch. He's a little small, and he's starting to get old from an NFL draft perspective. But I think he's going to get some nice draft capital after another big year, because I do think that having those clear separators is going to be big for a first year starter. And then, of course, Brock Bowers. The whole offense runs through Brock Bowers. It doesn't matter who's calling the plays. I know Tom Munkin's not there. Brock Bowers is still going to be the focal point, and that's the main reason why this Georgia offense can be just as good, maybe even a little bit better, because I think, Kendall Milton, to me, from a talent perspective, if he hits a ceiling, he's the best running back that would have been out there even last year. So this is a group that I really like. They want to be a team that recruits wide receivers well, and so I think they showed going out, getting some transfers and bringing those guys in. I think this offense is going to be more pass heavy than we've come to know, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, we've seen that with Mike Bobo before. So Mike Bobo returned as offensive coordinator after he kind of did that. He was offensive coordinator there. He was a quarterbacks coach from 2001, 2006. And then you watch that he take over that offense in 2007. He was promoted. And he was really good with, like, Aaron Murray was there when Todd Gurley was there. I think that was probably his best year. They averaged 37 points. But he's kind of looked at as Bobo's kind of looked as being like a quarterback guru, which is probably good if you're talking about development of Beck and these guys in there. And so that's something to know. Like, and I think there's some question marks though. He came back last year as an analyst, offensive analyst. So Kirby's just doing the same thing, bringing these guys back that kind of failed at, like, South Carolina. Some of these other guys have brought him back as analysts, and he came back. But I mean, the last time we did see him as kind of that offensive coordinator at Auburn, they only averaged 28 points per game. So there's some question marks, I think, a little bit with Bobo coming in there. But this talent is so good, it's going to elevate him. I think it's just one of those things where you just don't screw it up, right? Just keep that car driving straight, and you'll be all right. As far as notable losses, we talked about Stetson Bennett, Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington, I think, was a big piece of this offense from a blocking perspective, not necessarily as just a receiver. I think he did a lot for this rushing attack. I think they did good. And I think he gave mismatches on the offensive side, even if they didn't use them in the passing game. The defenses had to account for him out there. And then Kenny McIntosh was a very solid running back. I thought, and one of their better receivers out of the backfield too. But with this new system, I don't necessarily know how they're going to look at their running back position in terms of where that pass catching is going to come from. But yeah, notable losses here. I think from just having that quarterback that kind of knew the system, and you saw that development from Bennett. That's probably the biggest one.
I think so, but I also think that the Darnell Washington and Kenny McIntosh losses dictated who they went out and got on the transfer portal, because they don't have a replacement for Darnell Washington. I don't think they ever will. That is a very unique player. We don't see those types of players come through, but they don't have a tight end too that can go out there and be an extension of their offensive line right now. And so I think that's why those receivers came in, and that's why I think they might spread it out a little bit more and maybe less targets to running backs. I think looking at what Kenny McIntosh did, I think maybe Daijun Edwards is going to be that guy that incorporates some of that into his game. But really, I just think that those targets are going to end up going to wide receivers, and maybe they use the lad as an extension of the running game and things like that. Maybe they get creative, but it's Georgia. They're going to lose good players every year. It's going to happen again next year. I think they filled it pretty well this year.
Yeah. No, you heard it here first. Lad McConkey is the next Debo Samuel. That's what we're going to be talking about on the channel here.
No.
Don't take that there. All right. When you talk about recruiting classes, so when you're looking at what they did, they were number 2 overall. They're crushing it there. Their transfer rank though, 55. They don't really go after the transfers. Similar to some of these teams in there, they don't need to. They just go get their pick. They want this guy, they're going to take him. They really went heavy on the defensive side, which we'll talk about. But offensively, Monroe Freeling, 6'6", 294, big kid, big tackle, number 6 at his position. Lawson Lucky, again, tight ends that they're going after. Hewley. You could tell where they built out, inside out. Tyler Williams, again, one of those wide receivers that we're talking about. Anthony Evans, Roger Robinson there. But yeah, generally speaking, Georgia's going to go after their tackles and their inside offensive linemen, get some tight ends, and then sprinkle some wide receivers. That's generally speaking what they do.
Yeah, I like Tyler Williams and I like Pierce Spurlin as guys that could potentially work their way onto the field a little bit. There is a difficult path to being on the field if you're a wide receiver in this offense, but I do think I like Oscar Delt, but I think that there's some opportunity in that tight end room. And then, like you said, offensive line, I think they do a good job in refilling that position every year, and this is no different. They just are constantly churning out NFL level talent on that offensive line, and I think that this class kind of will do the same thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I will say this too. By breakdown, it is interesting how they have 9 recruits from Florida. They recruit very well from Florida. They go after Florida really hard, and I think that's one of the things that he came in and made that pipeline. And that's just something to know. Georgia and Florida, obviously the top 2, but he really goes into Florida and plucks those guys. When you're talking about key transfers, Lenneth Whitehead is out there. I wouldn't say he's like a key guy coming over from Tennessee, but he's a depth piece if they need him. Really, it's Dominic Lovett and Ra Thomas. I actually like both. I think Lovett can play really well. I like Ra though. Like Ra is one of those guys that kind of stepped up from Mississippi State at times in that offense. Kind of the guy over the middle, target guy, 6'1", 185, a little bit bigger, maybe can kind of take those steps over the middle. So both those guys I think are going to play a role in this offense.
Yeah, Lovett's the big one for me. I think, in looking at this collection of wide receivers, I still do think Ladd is the guy that they'll go to the most, but I think Lovett is that next guy up. In terms of even all those returning wide receivers, they always have high recruits, and it seems like the 3 stars end up pushing through a little bit more. This is an interesting approach. They haven't really attacked the transfer portal to get wide receivers. So kind of says something about how they were feeling about that room, but I think they did a good job in snagging some guys that they needed for sure.
Yeah. And then we're talking about impact players. I think Carson Beck, what is he going to be moving forward? How is he going to, kind of take over that room? Kendall Milton, Dominic Lovett, Ladd McClung. I had to put Ladd in here because I wanted to put a graphic of Ladd on here. So you put Ladd on here, but I do think that Ladd can be a guy for this offense that just moves chains, right? Like he was a pivotal piece last year on this offense. And I think it's something to note there. But I'm just really rooting for Kendall Milton. I think those other guys too behind him, Branson and those other running backs will play a role. But if Kendall Milton's healthy, I think that he could be a huge player for them.
Yeah, for sure. Some of his game, he's not Nick Chubb, but I just think of Nick Chubb when he was there. When I watch Kendall play, he's just so explosive. We should talk about Brock Bowers on this graphic before they start yelling at us. Brock Bowers also an impact player for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but he's got to have someone that gets him the ball. So I think Carson Beck is vital to this offense succeeding. And I mean, honestly, this offense looks like it could be once again as good or even better potentially than last year's group. So we'll see if Brock takes a step forward. I don't know that if that's possible. He's just so good. He's probably going in the top 10 in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah. Please don't yell at me, Georgia fans, about not having Brock on here. We know Brock's an impact player. Yeah. I was just looking at other guys here. And I would also say, I think with Brock too, I will say though, they're going to maybe need him just based on what that tight end room looks like. Maybe they need him to block a little bit more this year. I think there might be a case where we say hey, they have to keep him in line and they're going to have the block. So I think these other guys got to step up. I think these other guys are going to have to step up in one-on-one situations. But yeah, Brock, they're just going to give him an end around. He's going to run for 80 yards at a touchdown any time too. That's just Brock Bowers out there. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Now, when we flip over to the defensive side, I think the one thing that we're going to talk about here is that last year was supposed to be a rebuilding year for this team. 2022, a lot of people talked about this defense having to take a little bit of lumps and then get back up there. But you know what? They won a national title, which should be scary because this year they are bringing about some production.
Oh, yeah. I think getting the production that they got out of Malachi Starks as a true freshman last year was a unique thing for them in that I don't think they expected something like that, and he turned out to be one of the better safeties in the country. Nazir Stackhouse is just a dominant against the run. This entire group, Tyke Smith is their star. This entire group, it doesn't have the ceiling that this team did 2 years ago, but returning 83% of your starters on a national championship level defense that made a TCU offense that was very good look very pedestrian for an
Yeah.
entire game, even when they put their backups in. Yeah, I mean, I run out of things to say about Georgia defenses, and this is really no different. Kamari Lassiter out at corner is a good player. Javon Bullard at the other safety spot. Like, I just could talk about all of these players, and they're all going to probably play in the NFL at some point.
I couldn't imagine lining up against these guys on offense and just like I'd just be defeated. Like when you're thinking about what they could do and like the speed. I think the thing that always like gets me when I watch Georgia play is the speed out there. Like their speed is just they close holes fast. It's hard to get around the corner. Like when you're looking at these guys, and yeah, to your point, all these guys could be talked about a lot. There is I wouldn't say a weakness, but their outside linebackers are a little raw. I think that they're gonna have to see how that production, how they develop there. But overall, yeah, they're about 4 or 5-star guys. And when we're talking about notable losses, I mean, Jalen Carter we both have talked about Jalen Carter. Off the field issues aside, he's one of the most dominant players that was on that team in terms of what he could do last year. Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo is someone that I really like, and then Jaheim Singletary as well.
Yeah. Jalen Carter, I mean, we've seen what those three are doing. All three of those players are in Philadelphia. I keep forgetting that happened. But yeah, I mean, Nolan Smith just was dominant the other night in a preseason game. Like
Yeah.
Jalen Carter has flash moments. Keely Ringo is a lock to make that team despite falling to day 3, which he shouldn't have. These are notable, and it's crazy that we just talked about the defense in the way that we did when they're losing such good players. I had Carter and Smith both ranked as like top 10 grades and should certainly go inside the top 10, and only one of them did. But man, good group, always a good group. But
when I did the football guys mock draft, my first one, I had Nolan Smith going to 10. I loved Nolan Smith. I think he just made plays, and the fact that he went to the Eagles makes me sick to my stomach. Like it really does.
Sorry, man. Yeah.
Now, when we talk about recruits on the other side, this is where they make their money. Jordan Hall is one of the best defensive linemen in the country. 6'3", 317, number 2 in the defensive lineman there. Raylan Wilson is another guy. If you want to see closing speed, you go watch him on his film out there in Florida, out there in Tallahassee. Raylan Wilson was one of those guys that just closes fast. AJ Harris as well. Just look at the 5 stars here. These guys are just out there. Damon Wilson is another one who isn't necessarily a 5-star, but number 5 edge rusher of his class out of Venice. He's a stud as well. They just absolutely reloaded on the defensive side. These guys are all going to be talked about 2 or 3 years as just being stud, top 5, top 15 at their position.
Getting 4 or 5 stars is just crazy business, man. Like we've talked about a lot of teams now, and I think the most we've had is 2 5-stars.
Yes.
On I think either side of the ball. Maybe Texas had more than that, but man, oh man, do they recruit well? And why wouldn't you want to go to Georgia if you're a recruit? Like that is the team to go to. So good job as always, Kirby. You're building a dynasty. We're seeing it in real time.
This is like on NCAA 14 when it's like 7 years in and you just have every 5-star go into your roster. That's exactly what this is. And that's what he has. I mean, and if you're a defensive player, Georgia's exactly where I'm going because I'm going to go get drafted. Probably by the Eagles in the first round. Like that's just generally speaking, like, all right, I'll go there. And that's what you're seeing here with this defense. It doesn't matter what happens. They just plug and play them. And if they have shown too, I think the one thing that Georgia's done a really good job, like you mentioned earlier, they will play you if you're a freshman. They don't care. They want the best players out on that field. And I think that's something to note too. It's not one of those things where you're going to have to sit. Like you're going to play and you're going to out there. This one to be quick. They didn't have any transfers. The one transfer they had on the defense side is Smoke Bowie from A&M. And he got kicked off the team. He's not on the team anymore. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, we'll move on. All right, impact players. I love Javon Bullard. He's really fun. Safety. I love watching him out there. Michael Williams as well. I think, when they're talking about, like I mentioned earlier, they're pretty green on the outside linebacker position, I think. But their inside linebacker is loaded. Javon Dumas-Johnson, I think, is really good. Mondin is really good too. I think these guys are just studs on the inside, and I think they can definitely kind of make that big impact. Bullard was the Peach Bowl. I think he was the MVP and the national championship MVP. So that's fun. I think when you're thinking about how big of a playmaker he can be, but these guys are probably there, but you could have put all 11 dudes on this graphic if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm excited to see a lot of these dudes take steps forward. Like I said, Malachi Starks looks like a certified top 20 pick when we get to his draft. I mean, Javon Bullard is right there as well. Yeah, there are too many guys to talk about as impact players. The whole defense is going to be impactful, and they're probably going to be the top unit in the country again.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it.
All right, let's talk about this weak ass schedule. All right, let's look at this thing now. Georgia fans, before you yell at me, I mean, you know it's weak, and I get you playing the SEC, but there is not one team on this schedule that I think you are going to lose to. Like, there is not one, like, where we're going to talk about other teams that we have, like, oh, that one's a tough one. That's a toss-up. Oh, it's Ohio State. It's whatever. Like, UT Martin, no. Ball State, no. That's just not happening. South Carolina, if you lose to Spencer Rattler, you don't deserve to make the playoffs, so I don't think that's going to happen, but that's there. Do you see a loss on the schedule?
Missouri. No, I'm just kidding. Missouri played them tougher than every other team on their schedule last year. So I think that's an interesting game because of how last year went. They're at home this year.
Yeah.
Tennessee is the one. I'm down on Tennessee personally. I think hopefully we're watching Nico play by November 18th, but those are the only two. Ole Miss is interesting, but Ole Miss can't get. I talked about how Ole Miss could gash a team with their running game. They can't gash Georgia,
no.
And so Jackson Dart would have to be a perfect passer in that game. Those are really the only ones. Auburn's interesting, but Auburn's down right now. So yeah, I mean, congrats on the undefeated season, Georgia fans. We'll see you in the national championship again. And this is, when you look from a talent perspective, I think there's a reason we just look at the schedule and say, oh yeah, that's an undefeated season. They've reached that level as a program. So yeah, undefeated.
Yeah. So, I mean, the win total is 11.5. So you going over then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I wouldn't, I hate betting the over on that because there's little things that could happen. But yeah, I'd say over as well. The thing that doesn't worry me about Tennessee, and it might come back to bite me in the ass later, Tennessee fans might find this. I feel like Kirby and Georgia figured out that offense last year. And if you watched it, that game was not as close as you thought. That weather was weird in that second half. I felt like Josh Heupel's offense is gimmicky. And I think that Georgia's like, okay, we know how to stop this, and we're just going to go ahead and stop it this way. And I don't think they could figure it out. So I'm not worried as Tennessee anymore because I think Georgia's defense is just like, oh yeah, we know how to stop this, and it's not going to get past us. So I'm definitely going there. And then definitely if Tennessee does win that game, don't come fight me, Volunteer fans. But I really don't feel like it's this year. Maybe next year with Nico. Nico might be that difference maker on that side if he kind of steps up. So overall, Georgia, I think you're going back to the playoff. Like, I would be very surprised if you guys aren't in the playoff this year. In terms of that, I don't think you're going to lose at all. Even if you lost the game, you're probably going to win the SEC title again. You've accomplished that much, and I think there's some question marks with like Alabama at the quarterback position that could probably vault you there. But it'd be shocking if they weren't back in the playoff.
When do you think the next time Georgia will lose a game will be?
I'm going to say in the playoff this year.
Okay.
But I don't know to who. I think they lose in the
Michigan?
national title game. I can't. I'm never going to say Michigan, but I will say, like, I think that they could lose in the national title game this year. I don't know. It really depends on the quarterback position, right? Like, I think that rushing attack is good enough, but because of the injuries, if Beck and those guys are good enough to make the playoff, I think good enough to make the playoff and then win a national title are two different things. But this defense is so damn good that I could see them probably doing it. But I would say this year, I think in the playoff, they're going to lose.
That's fair. They haven't lost in 2 years. And so I don't like picking against them.
No.
So I think the reason I brought up Michigan is I think that they have the best shot because they've built a roster that like could compete with Georgia in the playoff.
Yeah.
There are a lot of teams that, I think Ohio State might be that team. I don't think Alabama is that team, and I think Penn State could be that team. So I really think it's Georgia versus whoever comes out of the Big Ten, and then I'm questioning it. But other than that, man, like I kind of think Georgia's going to win the national title again. I think I bet that immediately when that opened. So congrats, Georgia fans. You have another national title.
It could be. I mean, no, they absolutely can win that there. I think the biggest thing is I think Michigan maybe could do it, but they can't lose a TCU in the playoff. You can't do that. Like, I think they're built the way they could be to compete and do those things. But yeah, I think maybe like a USC with Caleb. I think of like Vince Young when he beat USC, that team, and you're like, oh, that transitional, just that player that can just go off that one game. If USC gets there, I think maybe maybe that would be like the one caveat I would say to just the Big Ten stuff. But,
That's
you know,
fair.
Georgia's probably going to be right there. So, Georgia fans, I'm not betting against you. I'm just saying it's unprecedented that you guys would win 3 national titles. But if anybody can do it, I love Kirby Smart. I've always been a fan of Kirby Smart. I thought he's done it the right way. He's built that program the right way. So I'm still on board there. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button. I hope you guys are ready for college football. Georgia fans, you've had a hell of a run. So we'll see if that thing can continue.